Hi everyone, Alexandra Jarrett, Jupiter Returns here with an overview of our new calendar year, the year we're going into 2021, as I'm sure I don't need to tell you. First things first, what I thought I'd do is just first off cover this idea of the new year, because really this 31st of December thing actually doesn't make an awful lot of sense. There's no real scientific reason behind why we celebrate the new year. And in fact, it doesn't really make an awful lot of sense in terms of the natural cycles of life. And that's really what we're dealing with the planets. You know, natural life on the earth, plant life, animal life, our life, moves in cycles. It's not in this linear process of the start of a year and then the end of the year. It's a lot more fluid. And it's basically a process where what's going on up there, the circular motion of the planets, the dance that the planet makes, is orchestrating how we're responding down here on Earth. Okay, so that's the thing to really try and tap into when you're trying to understand the process of life and the passage of time. So there's an awful lot of expectation essentially that gets put into this whole new year thing, and it can often just end up being a damp squib, because you know we just wake up on the 1st of January and yeah, it's just, you know, same shit different day essentially. And this idea that we might all suddenly burst into some new life and start, you know, embarking on all these New Year's resolutions and everything, it just, there's no sense to it, right? What I've done here is I've put these markers through this grand cross through the middle of the chart, just to demonstrate the point, because essentially we have 12 signs of the zodiac, 12 months of the year, super easy. 4 seasons, 1, 2, 3, 4. Each one has 3 months of it, okay? So a cardinal sign ushers in something new, so it's quite active. A fixed sign cements it in place, and then a mutable sign at the end of that quarter prepares us for change. It's blending out of this season and into this season. And that follows through beautifully all the way around the zodiac. So each of the quarters of the year, they have a very kind of definitive 30 days of start, 30 days of middle, and 30 days of end, essentially. The start points of these seasons are the solstices and equinoxes. So we've essentially just entered the 4th quarter. This is Capricorn, and when the sun enters the sign of Capricorn, as happened on the winter solstice, that begins this final season, which is 3 months long, and we're just sort of here, a little way in. So it just doesn't make any sense that this is where we've picked our new year to be. So really don't get too hung up on it. Essentially, the last quarter of the year is all about resting. It's all about going within. It's dark outside. We can't be very productive out there in the world because there aren't many daylight hours to utilize, and we're not feeling the sun's vitality, the energy of the sun, the aliveness that we feel when we feel the warmth of the sun. Forgive if there's some fireworks going on. It is the new year after all. So essentially this time is to go within, retreat within, to take stock and analyze, you know, the other 3 seasons of the year that we've already been through. What happened in spring, what happened in summer, what happened in autumn. We're trying to plan, because we're trying to ensure that if we just do it on the basis of survival, all right, and this is how our programming really works from ancient times. The ancients had to survive through winter at this point in time. So spring is all about, we must plant lots of new crops so that we can grow. Summer is wonderful, it's all coming to fruition and everything's ripening. Autumn is, okay, let's harvest all of this, let's reap what we've sown. And then the winter time is, well, we have to be really careful and measure this out. You know, Capricorn, we have to be very disciplined and make sure that we're going to see ourselves through the hard, cold winter, because there's nothing we can do to grow any more food until spring. So we have to, you know, Capricorn at the start of the winter is really needs that level of discipline and measure and all of those things. So, you know, getting all excited about starting something new at a time when really we're bringing things to a close, we're wrapping things up, we're going in and resting and restoring ourselves so that when we get to the spring equinox, so when the sun enters the sign of Aries down here, then we, that's when the new year really is. Okay, that's certainly in the Northern Hemisphere. You know, I have a Northern Hemisphere bias. You know, this is the vernal equinox, the start of the new year. And that's Aries, it's fire. That's like, yeah, let's go out there and make something happen in the world. Like, bring it on. It's not what we should be doing right now. So take solace in the fact that if you're really not feeling the whole New Year vibe, like, it's not really natural anyway. So, you know, just bear that in mind, because I think it's so easy just to get caught up in the narrative, and there's an awful lot of that going on. So trust how you're feeling, trust how your body is responding. Your body is way more sensitive to nature than it is to the man-made rules that, let's face it, in our society, we're not big fans of rest. We're not big fans of saying, oh, okay, let's just go indoors for a few months and process things. Like, no, we need to be out there, nose to the grindstone. So just chill with that idea. And I hope that there's some kind of solace in that, because, you know, where there's a lot of expectation, there's often a lot of disappointment that follows it. So enough of all that. That's just kind of setting the scene, and just sort of having a little bit of it's a bit of a bugbear of mine, the whole man-made calendar thing. If you want to learn a bit more about that, I have got a video that I did on understanding better the wheel of the year and going into it a little bit more deeply. So where are we? How are we starting this new calendar year then? Well, with that solstice, we had, as most people will know, we had the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in the sign of Aquarius. This was the really, really big, exciting news, and it was really exciting to see how this took off, and lots of people getting interested in what's going on in the sky. And then therefore, you know, potentially, hopefully, understanding a little bit more of the astrology through the excitement of the astronomy. So that was the big news, and we've come out of a year where it was really, everything was happening in Capricorn. So essentially, we had, at the beginning of last year, we had Saturn and Pluto come together in the middle of Capricorn. This was exact in March. So essentially, Pluto brings crisis, it brings death and rebirth. It brings the kind of change that is just, you cannot escape it. Like, there's nothing more powerful than Pluto, essentially. And it forces change to happen in a very powerful and very kind of, crisis way. I can't think, I'm getting a bit tongue-tied, but yeah, it's usually a crisis. It's usually a very powerful death and rebirth process. Now, Pluto had been in Capricorn since 2008. When Pluto moved into Capricorn, the sign of our structure, the sign of business and finance and, you know, the corporate world, and the hierarchy and the patriarchy. These are all kind of Capricornian themes. When Pluto entered Capricorn in 2008, we had the worldwide financial crisis begin. Not really anything has changed much since that point in time, really. Pluto's trying to bring radical change to Capricorn, and we've largely resisted that change because humans, we don't do change. We don't like change. We have to have it forced upon us. So the global economic crisis wasn't clearly enough for humanity to sort of get the message, like, really, this hierarchical structure, this organization of life on the planet doesn't really work because it's finite. There's finite resources, and we're rattling through them essentially, and it's going to come to a full stop. So we ignored that warning essentially, and we thought, no, we'll just keep on doing the same thing, and the banks will just keep on printing money, and we'll try and get everything back to normal. Clearly that hasn't happened. So there we are 11 years later down the line, and Pluto's a little bit further on in Capricorn. Pluto's really slow, so it takes a long time. So what happens is then Saturn comes along in his home sign, because he rules Capricorn, and he's like, okay, let me help you out. Let's go at this with, with both of us. And Jupiter was involved as well. And Jupiter expands things. Although Jupiter we generally kind of has the kind of stereotype as being a good planet, essentially he's more likely to bring a benefit, but he doesn't do well in Capricorn. And essentially when he's conjunct other planets, he's just really magnifying them. He's just expanding their effect. So we've got Saturn, which is all about karma. It's all about restrictions and rules. It's very hard lessons. It's accountability and responsibility and duty and all of these things. And it's literally rubbing our faces in it and saying, look, this is the responsibilities that we're just not facing. So Saturn and Pluto come together, and Saturn's essentially just adding weight. Like he's just putting a ton of weight behind Pluto. Then Jupiter comes along and makes it expanded into a worldwide. Jupiter rules Sagittarius. This is global travel. So it literally explodes this across the entire globe. And here we are. Here we are now, having gone through this process. And again, this is where it's really important to not have this kind of linear understanding of time, as in that was in 2020. And we're now moving out of 2020, so all that stuff we just leave behind, because we're not gonna, It's like there's rows of dominoes where you tip one over and they all fall down. Well, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction was just the first domino getting tipped over, and that's going to play out for a long time. And we're really going to look back on this year, 2020, the year we're coming out of, as being that point where the first domino was pushed over. But the repercussions of that going off in all different directions and doing loop-the-loops and everything else, that horse has bolted. And just because we're moving into 2021 doesn't mean the horse goes back in the stable, unfortunately. So Saturn and Jupiter have now moved out. So this is kind of like they've given Pluto a bit of help. Pluto's now on his own again. Pluto is going to carry on the process of trying to bring this profound change to our structure for the next 2 and a bit years. All right, before he's finished up there, Pluto will ingress into Aquarius in 2023, which means that what we're doing now with Saturn spending the next 2 years going through Aquarius is like Saturn's putting down the infrastructure, the solid, tangible paving slabs, literally paving the way for Pluto. It's like, okay, I'm going to leave you to finish off the job in Capricorn, and I'm going to start getting things ready over there in Aquarius. So the fact that we started the new Jupiter and Saturn cycle in that as well, whoopsie. Yeah, Saturn didn't want to behave. Then that's really important when we look at the bigger context. This work is going to still continue until it reaches, the desired point, and then we start doing the Pluto work in Aquarius. All right. So, and then by that time, Saturn will have moved into Pisces. So it's all going on like clockwork, and it's essentially, it's not even circles like cycles, it's a spiral. Time is just this big spiral, and we're going past the same point, but where it differs from a circle is that it's from a slightly different viewpoint each time. So that's how it's all interconnected. Don't think of it in this very kind of linear way of, oh, 2020 is finished, hope 2021 is going to be different, because it just doesn't work like that, and you're setting yourself up to be disappointed, essentially. But that, bearing that in mind, you know, that was a huge momentous thing that we've just gone through, the conjunction there. And 2021 will be very different from that. It's not going to be as heavy. You know, Capricorn energy is earth. It's heavy. You know, it's depressing. We're now in more air. And this is just a little bit lighter, a little bit more to do with intelligence rather than the tangible, practical, material matters. So, you know, there's a lightening feel just from that perspective. But also we're not going to be feeling as much Pluto energy. And Pluto is so serious and so dark, you know. It's, you know, we had Jupiter and Pluto together for all of 2020, which really gave birth to a lot of this sinister beliefs, conspiracy theories. Yeah, and there is truth in everything. I'm not putting any of that down at all. It's really important to explore and test our beliefs. But that Pluto energy infused our beliefs, Pluto, Jupiter, and really brought this very sinister undertone, like where we're seeing bad around every corner, expecting the worst, expecting the darkness and the shadows, and, you know, this is just a plot to kill off humanity kind of thing. I mean, it doesn't really get much more serious and dark than that, does it? So we're not going to be having the whole Pluto thing. So that's going to be a relief in itself. So essentially what I'm going to do tonight is just give you an overview of what the main energy, that Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn was the main energy of 2020. Then as we move into 2021, what can we expect essentially? And we're going to have an introduction now to a continuation of Saturn. Saturn's still in a strong place because Saturn also rules Aquarius, not just Capricorn, it's a co-ruler of Aquarius. But we're going to be experiencing his connection with Uranus. So what we're going to have is we're going to have a square aspect between Saturn in Aquarius and Uranus in Taurus, and that's going to be essentially the dominant background theme to the year. Now, obviously, there's going to be lots of other things that are going on as well, but the sort of transpersonal planets, as we call them, they're kind of really setting the bigger tone in the background. And as we go through the year, then of course I'll be here all the time to talk to you about the more surface level stuff as we move through it. So don't think that tonight's just going to all be about, you know, every little thing that's going to happen, because it's not. I'm sure you don't want to listen to me for that long anyway. I don't. So yeah, so that we're going to touch on the main things, the flashpoints to look out for, and how it all connects essentially, and trying to piece together where that fits into the bigger picture of things. So let's look at a square aspect first. Then the square is going to be the aspect whereas we're moving from a conjunction sort of year to a square. And a square is essentially, it's a provocative, annoying, irritating kind of feel, because essentially you've got two planets at right angle to each other. So you've got, essentially what you've got is, okay, a 90-degree angle. You've got Uranus over here. All right, and Uranus is trying to progress. He's trying to move in that direction. And then you've got Saturn, and he's trying to move in that direction. And where the square comes together, they both clash. And it's like, well, I'm going that direction and you're in my way. And Saturn's like, well, unlucky, because I'm going that way and you're in my way. So something has to give. All right, so it's trying to force something active to happen. It's trying to push, you know, two forces, neither of which wants to give up. And the fact that neither of them wants to give up is exacerbated by the fact that they're both in fixed signs. So, oh goodness, Saturn's just not behaving. So Saturn is in Aquarius, which is a fixed sign because it's that middle month in the season of winter. So that's the very peak of winter when we really, really are in the bleak, barren, cold times. It's fixed energy. It's like, yeah, winter's definitely here. And Taurus is the fixed energy of spring, right? The middle month of spring. And Taurus, we all know Tauruses, you know, they're stubborn. It's a big, heavy ball, doesn't want to move, thank you very much. And nor should it. You know, it's that midpoint of spring that solidifies spring into place. So neither of these guys are really big on change. They're not super great at compromise because they're not mutable. Immutable signs are all about, oh yeah, okay, choppy changey, but not the fixed signs. And these planets, you know, they've got some history. In mythology, Saturn is the son of Uranus, Kronos, as he's called, and Oranos. So Saturn and Uranus, Saturn's basically the son of Uranus. Saturn sees an opportunity to overthrow his father, Uranus, and take his place, essentially. So they are at odds with each other from that point of view as well. And that's actually an important dynamic to consider in this kind of picture that we're forming of 2021. And I'll probably expand a little bit on that later. So we know we've got a square, so we know that that's going to be really like jabby. No, like you move, no, you move, no, you move. Essentially, that's what the planets are going to be saying. And someone's just going to have to bend a little bit, and neither of them want to. So that's going to happen 3 times throughout the course of the, well, it's kind of the background music the whole time, but when that square becomes precise, when it's exact, or when it perfects, as we call it, that will happen 3 times because of the retrogrades of each of the planets, all right? Because we currently have Uranus in retrograde, and then it'll turn direct, and then, you know, backwards and forwards, and same with Saturn. So we're going to have 3 doses of this energy. So what can we expect? And what's the whole point? And one of the things that I hope is going to help cement in what the age of Aquarius, the energy of Aquarius really is. And I've put him up here. I hope that's showing up okay on the camera. This is my bee, my golden bee. And bees are just such incredible sacred animals. And I think I've chosen it as the mascot for 2021 because I think bees have the perfect compromise between Uranus energy and Saturn energy. And if we think of Aquarius, Aquarius is the tribe, it's the coming together, it's our community, okay? So if we think about the beehive, that's exactly what we've got. We've got this beautiful community. And in fact, it's a very Saturnian place as a beehive because Saturn rules the number 6. And that's what we have a hexagram, and a hexagram obviously is the shape that beehives are in. And in fact, if you look online for images of Saturn from space, you'll see that Saturn itself has this bloody great hexagon shape right on the top of the planet. It's quite beautiful. So there's a strong correlation between bees and Saturn. And Saturn's all about the duty. It's all about the structure and these kinds of things. And I'll explore Saturn a little bit more. But you see, the bee is a solitary creature, right? You don't see, well, occasionally you do, but they don't work in a pack. They're not moving around in a herd. I mean, yes, you get a swarm every once in a while, but, you know, by and large, bees just do their work individually. And that's very much a Uranian principle. They're free, they can fly wherever they want. You know, they're not sort of tethered to the field, for example, like the bull would be. They can just fly off wherever they like and just be completely independent and free. And unbeknownst to them, or maybe it is known to them, I don't know, but the act of what they're doing, you know, as they're collecting the pollen from the flowers, has all these wonderful repercussions for the rest of all of the other species around the ecosystem. They're pollinating the flowers. They're doing this really important job. So there's this wonderful kind of side effect, essentially, of the fact that they just have this independence and that they're covering such a wide spectrum between them all, that's continuing the survival of the entire planet. And of course, they're involved very much in food production, which is going to be another theme this year. But what they do is they take that individuality and that personal freedom and the ability to go wherever they want, and they're not tied to any kind of schedule, and they haven't got a boss breathing down their neck saying, you've got to go to that flower, and then I want you on that flower. You know, they're just like, off you go. But they come back to the hive. You know, they all come back to this central place, and they cooperate, and there's total equality. You don't get one bee coming back going, oh, well, I pollinated 53 flowers today and you only pollinated 51. So I'm going to make my little hexagon just that little bit bigger than your hexagon. Like, it just doesn't work. There's an equality and there's a cooperation, and they understand that, you know, the freedom facilitates their structure. So this is Uranus and Saturn. You know, it's bringing the best of both of those things together. They can't have the freedom unless they've got the safety and structure of the hive to come home to. You know, so it's finding that perfect balance. And that's really what we're going to be pushed to do this year. And I think that's a massive theme of the COVID crisis that we're in, really. And so the bee really, I feel, symbolizes that. And so whenever you get caught up in all of the drama of what 2021 is going to bring, just remember the bee and just think, no, I'm going to be a bee. I'm going to be. I'm going to find the right way to balance out the desire for independence and freedom and you know, not being told what to do, with actually we do need some safety, we need some structure, and we do need to cooperate with each other for good reasons as well. So I think that the bee is a perfect symbol of that. So an introduction then. So the types of things that I suspect that we're going to experience, just a short list, but I think that we're going to see cyber attacks and a lot of instability in the online world. Saturn stress tests things because Saturn wants things to endure. It wants things that are really, really solid and reliable. So he stress tests them, and he stress tests us, you know. Trust me, I just had Saturn move into a really sensitive part of my chart, and it's really stressed, showing up where the weaknesses are so that we can address them. That's his job. And Uranus very much is about the digital world, the cyber world, the virtual world. So we can expect some stress testing going on. And the peak times will be when those squares perfect, and I will tell you what those dates are. So cyber attacks, and very much around security. So cyber security is going to be a thing, and I really would recommend one of the best ways to capture Saturn in a helpful way is to be prepared, have a strategy, have a plan, get organized. So, you know, off the back of this, maybe think about just having a think about your cybersecurity, your passwords, your online banking, all of those sorts of things, and just think, you know, if there was a cyber attack, how vulnerable am I? So that Saturn doesn't have to come along and stress test you in a really unpleasant way. You know, just try and head off any potentials like that before they happen. Space, like as in outer space. Space is a real theme of Uranus and Aquarius. And so we've already started to see lots more going on than we've had in recent times up there. We've had specific individuals like Elon Musk really implementing, putting in place a Saturn infrastructure, Saturn in outer space, that's digital. So I'm thinking here of the SpaceX project, satellites. So there's almost like a dominance thing going on, of wanting to dominate that space, have an ownership or a hierarchy of it. And I think we'll see some clashes over that as well, because Saturn wants to be the boss, you know, doesn't like sharing the top spot with anyone else. So I imagine that we're going to see some issues around ownership of space, and also intellectual property. I think that's going to be a really hot topic this year as well, because Saturn is that tangible material stuff. That's like, I own that. That is my material accomplishment in the world. And Uranus is very much about the intellect, and something that has more of a vibrational or virtual creative essence to it. So intellectual property stuff, we might see new rules being put into place, or issues around that. Responsibility in cyber worlds, let's call it, the online place that we all spend so much of our time now. These issues of responsibility we saw kind of creeping in, because of course we had Saturn move into Aquarius for a little while back in April, when we had the first lockdown, because it was Saturn in Aquarius, which is like a limit of community, like a lack of networking and friendships and gathering and social movement. But what we started to see happening was that there was a call for there to be more of a responsibility, more accountability for some of the social network sites, in terms of, what people, the freedoms that people are allowed in terms of freedom of speech. Well, if that's facilitating, I don't know, online bullying, for example, or predatory behavior, or all sorts of things, then there's been this real push for them to have more accountability and responsibility for giving a platform, essentially, to people that can use that platform for wrong, essentially, for exploiting other people. So that's going to be another theme for sure. Disruptions to the supply chain is a real biggie, and we've already started to experience a little bit of it, had a fine brush with it, but that's really going to be a big feature, and particularly, with Taurus involved here. Taurus rules our financial markets and the free flowing of money, which is kind of what makes the whole world go round. But also it's food and the basic resources of survival, really is what Taurus deals with. Food and fuel, and the real simple things like, have I got a roof over my head? Have I got clothes? Is there food in the fridge? That kind of thing. So these are the things that we're going to experience disruptions with. I mean, Uranus causes disruptions anyway, but when Saturn comes along and is provoking through the square aspect, then we're going to see Saturn's effect as being blockages and limitations and, boundaries. So we can really expect that, I'm afraid to say. But, Saturn is a humbling experience, essentially. And in some ways, humanity, we kind of do need humbling a bit. Saturn, because Saturn are the things that endure time, they're the things that we can completely rely upon. What happens is that we start to take things for granted, because they're so reliable and they're so durable, that we just kind of think, well, there'll always be roads, and there'll always be, I can always go to the shop and get some food, and I can always put some petrol in my car, and it's just kind of these things that we take for granted. And so I think Saturn's going to give us a bit of a slap around the chops in that respect, and just say, well, actually, you know what, you're being a bit of a spoiled brat here, humanity. You can't really continue to take these things for granted and just rest on them as much as you have done in the past. So I would just anticipate that kind of disruption going on. Social limitations and restrictions, I'm afraid, are going to be an ongoing feature. Saturn in Aquarius is precisely that, social limitations. Jupiter is alongside softening Saturn's effect here for the first year, although he's not super close by, he's in fact the wrong way around. Jupiter's already starting to pull away from Saturn because Jupiter moves much quicker. So Jupiter's only going to be in Aquarius for a year, whereas Saturn will be there for like 2.5 years. So, Jupiter is going to put some distance in there, but it's still in the same sign. And so Jupiter will soften the blow. It will create opportunities despite, all the difficulties that are going on. And in fact, Jupiter does really throw us a nice kind of bonus later on in the year, which I'll come to talk to you about as well. But yes, Saturn is going to continue the theme of social limitations and limitations of our freedom. And I think that what we're going to see as a result of that is Uranus's rebellion. And so we're going to see a fight between the limitations and the need for freedom. This is going to be the big thing. It's going to be, I have the right to my freedom. I'm an individual. I'm not going to be treated like a number. All of the kind of, I'm not just going to follow the rules because you tell me to. Uranian kind of rebellion. And Saturn's going to be, well, we'll see about that. So, there will be, I anticipate some civil unrest as a consequence of that. We're going to see a continuation of lots of people taking to the streets and protesting. And certainly, with Taurus, we're going to see more of the climate, what are they called? Extinction Rebellion type of thing going on. We're also going to see, I think we've got certainly a lot of farmers in Asia protesting as well. Taurus is farming and food production. So we're going to see a lot of the civil unrest will be around food production, food supply, all of those kinds of things, and particularly where we've exploited, because that's what Saturn does. Saturn's the boss. He does exploit people, and we have, we've had it good for a long time off the unfortunate kind of circumstances that's meant for other people in poorer countries. Who are not much more than slave labor in terms of food production. So we're going to see those people, rising up, and we're seeing sort of strikes and that kind of thing taking place already in protests, all of those kinds of things. And also with regards to the climate itself, because Taurus is very much related to the Earth and to planet Earth. And so the climate itself, Saturn is all about karma, because essentially with Saturn, we reap what we sow. So periodically, where we've done our work, we've done our duty, we've taken our responsibilities seriously, and we haven't just lazed around, we've done our work, Saturn comes along and he goes, great, here's some rewards, they're going to last you, you're going to rise up. But equally so, if we haven't done our work, if we haven't taken things seriously and responsibly, Saturn comes along and goes, well, I'm going to make your life hard for you until you get it, until you comply. And so I think, in this hard aspect of Uranus, I think we're going to get some karmic kind of situation with regards to the climate and our exploitation of the resources of the Earth. Towards things like mining and the oil industry and all those things where we have to literally kind of go down into the earth and pull the resources out. These are the areas that we really could see some quite powerful karmic payback, essentially. So that's another thing to look at. It's all fun, isn't it? I promise you there are some good stuff as well. Revolutions in food and farming, you know, things like the surge in veganism since Uranus moved into Taurus has been a huge thing. And we'll see more of that, but we'll also see kind of whether corporations are trying to then cash in on that increase in terms of ethics around food production. So, you know, all of a sudden, you know, the supermarkets can see that they can make some money out of, you know, producing sort of fake meat burgers and all of these things. And it's pushing the inventiveness, which is another Uranian thing. It's like it's pushing us to invent alternatives. All right, some real tangible Saturn alternatives, Uranus, in terms of our diet and our food production. And it may well be that those disruptions to the supply chain, you know, where Saturn is stress testing the ability of goods and products to reach everyone, Uranus, the community, is showing us, oh, okay, well, this is how we need to address that going forwards. If we're no longer able to get our rice imports from there, then what are we going to do about that? You know, if we can't, if people are really en masse giving up meat, what does that mean for the industrial farming sector? What could that be replaced with? You know, that's the good thing about a square, is that it pushes you to have to make a change and come up with a solution that you otherwise wouldn't have done. You'd have just carried on, you know, resting on your laurels, so to speak. So revolution in farming and food, and also a revolution in, as we're starting to see already, in financial markets. So alternative currencies, so your bitcoins and all the other kind of altcoins and cyber-based money, which is essentially decentralized. And that's where we're going to have the fight between Uranus being the freedom, the community, the collective, the decentralized, and Saturn being the whole, like, oh no, there has to be a structure and there has to be a hierarchy, and the corporations have to be in charge of this. We can't have the mere population running the show and having, you know, a dominant view. So there's going to be clashes there as well. But again, it's just going to point out where the weaknesses are to help us to move into the future, which is what Uranus is all about. Like, Uranus is progress. And it's inventiveness, and it's the future, and it's very radical. It's like the most cutting edge ideas and genius moments that we have. Saturn, on the other hand, is a bit more about tradition, and let's do things the way we've always done them. You know, go and see the bank manager, and you know, in his leather office and with a shiny mahogany table, and you'd go cap in hand and ask if you might be able to buy a house, kind of thing. Whereas Uranus, it's just like, yeah, I'll just sit on my computer and trade in Bitcoins. Thank you very much. So yeah, that's going to be another feature. Civil unrest, revolution, climatic disturbances, the abrupt karma with regards to the exploitation of the Earth's resources. I think that's pretty much it in terms of the global scene. I'm sure things will occur to me as we go through the year. And if anyone else has got any ideas of how they think that this might show up, then I'm absolutely all ears. But I think they're the main things to watch out for. And it really does speak to me as a civil unrest. It's going to be a personal freedom against the man and the rules and the boss saying no. And all the repercussions thereof. So bring it back to B all the time, come back to B. Like, how do I find the right compromise to bring out the best of both of these energies, which is what the bees do. I can go off and have my personal freedom and take advantage of being, you know, in the collective and the safety of the hive as well. So I've got a list here. I'm just thinking if I can show it on the camera. If you want to take a screenshot, it might not show up because of the light, but this is essentially just a list, as you can see, of Uranus and Saturn kind of themes, really, the influences and energies that each of them have. And you'll see they're very, very opposing. So we've got Uranus is progress, new, different, disturbing, instability, cognitive and conscious, equality. It likes to begin things and create ideas. It's fast, it's erratic, it's inventive. It's about individuality and freedom. It's about the imagined world, and it's very stimulating. Whereas Saturn is about endurance. It's about age and the old, things staying the same, things being reliable, structure, limitations, materials, hierarchy, mastering and manifesting, slow, stable, legacy, conformity, responsibility, rules, and being grounded. So loads of words for you to kind of get your head around and understand the influences that are at play, and understand therefore that when those two energies are clashing and they're not letting up, that there's a real potential there for us to see some not very nice moments. And we're gonna move into this quite quickly. I think we're going to start seeing this as of January, and I really just want to flag this up for you, is that the middle part of January is really quite tense. So Saturn and Uranus aren't quite exact yet then. They are what we call applying, which means that the square aspect between them is building up. So they're getting closer and closer, but they haven't yet got exactly to the same degree. But it's applying, it's building up. We can feel ourselves being pulled into that energy. But what's going to be happening is, and this will start to make sense with some of what I've guided you through in 2020, if you've been watching me. So we've been doing a lot of work with Mars. We've had the Mars retrograde, and that finishes in like a day's time, January the 2nd. Mars moves out of shadow, and that process is complete. Mars is all about our sense of inner warrior. It's like, what do I want and how am I going to go and make it happen in the world? It's very active and it's very fast and it's very fiery. It's passion. Like, what do I want? And when we're unconscious about Mars energy, it can be aggression, it can be rashness and impulsiveness. It can be, you know, like just stopping at nothing to get what you want, and, you know, making some poor decisions, that kind of thing. And it rules fire, it rules blades, so it can be quite unpleasant energy in that sense. So with the retrograde, which happens every other year, we're doing the inner work with Mars. So this is what we've done in 2020. So that in the following year, when there isn't a retrograde, the work we've done with Mars on the inside can then start to take place in the outer world, in the macrocosm, as opposed to the microcosm. You know, we can go out into the world and start to make things happen in the world according to the work that we've done on ourselves. So this starts as of January the 2nd, when Mars leaves the post-retrograde shadow. Mars shortly after is then going to move into Taurus. So you can see what's building already. A word about Mars in Taurus. Mars in Taurus, Taurus is Earth. It's steady as a rock. It's slow. Nothing ever happens very quickly with Mars, with Taurus. So Mars in Taurus people, they'll just, you know, you can irritate them. You can do something annoying to them, and you can keep doing it, and they'll just take it, and they'll just take it, and then they'll take it, and then all of a sudden they will snap and it's like raging bull. Then, you know, it's like Mars with the whole weight of a massive ox behind it, and you don't want to get in the firing line of a Mars Taurus when they're at that point. So what we're moving into between January the 18th and January the 21st, we're going to have this square aspect between Saturn and Uranus activated by Mars coming along and joining Uranus. So that is shocking violence, all right, shocking Uranus, violence, Mars. Surprising violence, like fast disruption, you know, it's just like someone got shot out of nowhere kind of energy. And, you know, particularly where there's been a sense of, you know, Mars is the individual, it's about me, it wants its own way in life. So where the me in the world has really been held back so much through 2020, and with all this expectation around the new year and how great and how different things are going to be kind of thing, Mars could soon find that it's just like, oh, you know, nothing's really going to allow me to be me again. I'm just being held back again. So when he meets up with Uranus, we could get a bit of explosive, volatile, shocking events taking place. That's going to be exacerbated also by the fact that Aquarius season starts when the sun moves into the sign of Aquarius. And the sun also is about me. It's you know, about, you know, my ego, my identity. Sun and Saturn are therefore going to be conjunct, and they are going to pair up and square with Mars and Uranus. So how it goes basically is Sun goes into Aquarius on the 18th. Mars conjuncts Uranus exactly on the 20th, which is the inauguration day of the US president. Then the moon comes along. Where's Moon gone? Here she is. The moon comes along as well, and she's going to conjunct. So moon being our emotions and it being the public as well. It's very, very much related to, you know, the collective sentiment. And of course, what we can see there is that this is the first quarter square moon aspect as well, which those of you who know me and know a bit about astrology know that that's a crisis point anyway, in and of itself. So the moon conjuncts Mars and Uranus on the 21st. So essentially, the moon is applying to all of this stuff through Aries, and as she moves into Taurus, so from the 18th to the 21st, I just like expect there to be, you know, a bit of shock and awe, essentially. How that's going to play out, we just don't know, but that's going to give us a very fast, shocking, awakening kind of introduction to the Uranus-Saturn kind of vibrations. You know, we'll start to see, oh, this is how it's going to play out then. So all of those themes of how it could play out that I talked about, let's see, you know, what comes about essentially. We also have to take into account that Jupiter isn't far off at that point either. So we've got Jupiter. Jupiter tends to magnify things as well. And Jupiter also rules politicians. It rules the leaders of our society. And it also rules our beliefs, all right, our religious beliefs, and also our sense of, you know, in a hard aspect like this, self-righteousness, you know, and there's been a shit ton of that around this year, hasn't there? Let's face it. Like, I believe this, and if you don't believe this, you must be stupid. So, like, there's just been so much of that. Because Jupiter is like, I know everything. I'm, you know, big head kind of city. And yet it's the know-it-all. And it's very, very, it's firmly believing that it knows the truth, we've even created this this whole kind of section of society that are referred to as truthers now out of the Jupiter involvement in 2020. So again, we might see the darker side of Jupiter, which is that whole kind of righteousness thing as well. But yeah, politicians, leaders, royalty, they're the kinds of people that could be pulled into it as well because of the Jupiter vibe. Or it could just be that Jupiter just kind of expands it and makes it something that's more far-reaching. It also rules the education arena, higher education, universities, you know, that kind of thing as well, and international travel. So that those are the themes that Jupiter could pull in. But you can see we've got the potential here for you know, some real powerful volatility. And yeah, that's just a couple of weeks away. So we gotta start getting prepared, really. So the 3 dates then to bear in mind for the Saturn-Uranus square then are, so the first, when they come exact, so bear in mind this will be an ongoing theme. It's not going to just come and go. It's always going to be present, but the moments when it's really peaking are going to be, the first one is the 17th of February. And this is at 7 degrees, okay? So Uranus will be at 7 degrees of Taurus, and Saturn will be at 7 degrees of Aquarius. So let's just shift those away for the moment. We'll put that square back just to focus our attention on these two. So 7 degrees. So check your chart. You know, what part of your life is going to be feeling this? You know, ignoring what's going on out there in the big world. How's it affecting you personally? Do you have any planets or angles, specifically in Taurus or in Aquarius? The first half of those signs are going to be affected the most. It's also going to affect the other fixed signs as well, though. So that's going to be the Leos, and it's going to be the Scorpios, all right, by sort of square and opposition, all right, and then square and opposition. So the Scorpio and Leos are going to, you know, not have quite so much, but Taurus and Aquarius, any planets that you've got there. So the first hit will be 7 degrees. The second square that's going to happen, I suspect, will be the one that we're really going to feel the most. It's going to have the most weight because it's so much more exact. And it's also, we're going to have, when it goes exact, the moon is going to be in Leo, and that's, sorry, the date for that is the 14th of June. Okay, so just as we're pulling into the summer solstice, which is when the sun moves into Cancer down here, the moon will be in Leo, another fire sign, that day. So actually what we'll get is what we call a T-square. So it's really, really exact. The exact Saturn-Uranus square is very, very precisely exact, but also it's going to be joined up by the moon in Leo as well. So I think that one's going to be the most powerful hit that we get. And then things sort of drift away again, the square loosens up a bit, and then they come back together again for the third and final hit of 2021. It does carry on further than that. The last one is actually going to be on Christmas Eve, 2021, 24th of December, and that will be at 11 degrees of Taurus and Aquarius. So it's 7 degrees on the 17th of February, 13 degrees on the 14th of June, and 11 degrees on the 24th of December. So have a look at your chart, work out those dates, work out those placements. Obviously get in touch with me and book a reading if you need to sort of, you know, really go deep into it. We can absolutely do that work. So they're going to be the flashpoints. We're also obviously we've got eclipses going on as well. At the moment, we've got the South Node in Sagittarius and the North Node in Gemini, and that's going to continue through 2021. We are going to start to, so the nodes move the other way around. The around the chart to the rest of the planets. So whilst the planets are moving this way, the nodes are moving that way. So we're going to start to blend from Gemini into Taurus and from Sag into Scorpio. One of our eclipses this year is going to be in those signs as well. So again, more emphasis on the fixed signs. So let me tell you about the eclipses just briefly then. So you've got those dates in mind. I have got it here somewhere. Hold on. Okay, so May the 26th is the first one that we're coming into. It's a full moon total lunar eclipse at 5 degrees of Sagittarius. And that's going to be in square to Jupiter. Now, this pulls me into some really good news. Jupiter. I like Jupiter. You know, it's got a lot to offer. It's got a lot of hope. What's going to be happening is as Jupiter moves through Aquarius, okay, so Jupiter came together with Saturn at the beginning of Aquarius at solstice. Going to be hanging out in Aquarius for a year, but moving a lot quicker than Saturn. And what's actually going to happen is Jupiter is going to ingress Pisces. Whoops. Pisces for a little way as well, actually, before retrograding back into Aquarius. Now, what's good about that, I hear you all ask? Well, I'll tell you, is that Jupiter likes fun, right? Jupiter wants an adventure and he wants to be happy and he wants to be optimistic and bouncy and all of those things. Go on holiday and just, you know, have a nice time. And he's been really, really limited, you know, all of this time really going through Capricorn has been really, really hard for Jupiter. And it's going to be a little bit better in Aquarius, but Aquarius is still a Saturn-ruled sign. Saturn's about work and duty and rules, and Jupiter's about fun and adventure and having a good time. So, you know, don't really get on well. So Jupiter likes to party, but for the last sort of couple of years, that's been more of an office party, you know, like the boss is still there, Saturn, he's still there. It's like, well, it's got the word party in it, but really, it's not my idea of fun. I don't know about you. So what's going to happen is Jupiter's going to spend a little time in Pisces. Now, Jupiter is the co-ruler of Pisces. And so this is where Jupiter can really just like let go and actually just chill and have some fun. He's away from Saturn, putting loads of distance in between, not even in the same sign, and it's home ground. So Jupiter is going to find his smile again for a little while, and remember what it's like to really, really have some fun, not just go to an office party. So the dates that Jupiter's going to be in Pisces, and I'm really excited about this because my sun is right at the beginning of Pisces there, 0 degrees Pisces. So I'll get Jupiter 3 times, which is really lovely. Have you got anything at the very beginning of Pisces? I think Jupiter's going to go up to about 2 degrees. So yeah, you'll have Jupiter up to that point. So Jupiter in Pisces is going to take us from May the 3rd right through to the end of July, July the 27th. So we're going to have like this 3-month chunk of summer where Jupiter can bring us back into fun and optimism and hope and joy and abundance and all of these wonderful things. So that's the sweetener. That's what we've got to look forward to. Now, there's a little bit of a caveat that I have to put around that because, you know, I think that if we're all kind of like, great, you know, let's drop the rules, let's all start going on holiday again, because let's not forget, you know, Jupiter is international travel and holidays and all of those things. You know, I think there may be the potential for some disappointments. It also, this period of time that is in Pisces kind of straddles when we have some of the really powerful eclipses that we're going to have. So they'll have a bearing on it too, as will the fact that at that time we'll have Mercury retrograde. And we all know what that means for travel, like travel disruptions, changes of plans, getting lost, lost baggage, all of those kinds of things. Mercury retrograde will be in Gemini at that time as well. Gemini being about sort of logistics and the movement of people and information and all of those kinds of things as well. So that could kind of, so don't be sort of planning the world cruise essentially, or if you are, don't just throw caution to the wind and be like, oh, it's Jupiter, everything's going to be fine. Just be like, well, yeah, it's Jupiter, but Saturn and all these other things are still going on in the background. So we just, you know, just say, okay, how can I expect the best but prepare for the worst? That would be the way to deal with it. Another thing that's going to happen while Jupiter is in Pisces, could be a little bit gnarly, is we will by then have Mars, where are we gone? Down here. Mars will be in Cancer and will therefore be in opposition to Pluto. So we will just get another little bit of a hit of that, that Pluto vibe around that time. But Mars is fast moving, and so it's not going to be a big, deep, long-lasting theme. It's going to be, you know, a few days kind of thing, but it is quite powerful energy. So there are other things that might just take the edge off the whole Jupiter in Pisces free-for-all. But it is definitely something to look forward to. It really is, like, you know, the sunshine coming out from behind the clouds, and that's really nice for us in the Northern Hemisphere, because obviously that'll be summertime too. So I think we've got happy summer times to look forward to. So going back then to the eclipses, which isn't on that page, or that one, or that one. Hold on, I've gone Mercury retrograde. You see, it's got me already. Not that one. Hang on, this is good, isn't it? Eclipses. Okay, so that was May the 26th. And the reason I was talking about Jupiter then, why it threw me off on that tangent, is that we will have a total lunar eclipse, 5 degrees of Sagittarius. And that's going to be actually in square to Jupiter. So we'll have some moon. So we've got May the 26th down there. And then we'll have the moon, which leaves Venus. So we've got the opposition that we would ordinarily have. The sun and moon at full moon are in opposition. And then what they're going to do is they're going to create a T-square to Jupiter, whilst Jupiter's just kind of slipped into Pisces for a little while. So that eclipse then is going to kind of trigger things that involve Jupiter, essentially. And so I imagine international travel will be one of those things. So look out for that date. That's May the 26th. And we're also at that time building into that second and most powerful square between Saturn and Uranus then as well. So that's applying again. Then we have the Mars-Pluto opposition after that eclipse. And then the next eclipse, which comes 2 weeks after. So this is June the 10th. And this is the new moon, nearly total eclipse, solar eclipse at 19 degrees of Gemini. And this will be conjunct a retrograding Mercury. So by then we'll have Mercury will be red, and the moon will be down here. So sun and moon come together at the new moon, and they're going to be conjunct retrograde Mercury in his own sign of Gemini. So that's really going to exacerbate the whole Mercury retrograde that we're going to be experiencing at that time. And what's going to be happening actually is that this is all going to be in square to Neptune. Now, this brings me on to, yeah, it's just a square. this brings me on to the theme of Neptune, which we haven't really talked about, but again, this is another one of the big themes, one of the background themes that we're already being pulled into. So the nodes of the moon, if we just clear off everything else, currently the nodes of the moon, the lunar nodes, are karmic and destined points that create our eclipses. They're currently building into a square aspect with Neptune. Okay, so that's going to go exact in the not too distant future. I'll update you as we go through. That's taking place at 19 degrees of Pisces. So that's, you know, if you've got planet triangles around there, have a look for it. Essentially, with Neptune energy in a hard aspect, Neptune essentially rules the collective pool. Essentially, it's like the collective unconscious. And let's face it, like most of the collective is unconscious anyway. But it's essentially, it's the pool, it's the collective pool, be that, you know, I mean, it's water, it's a water sign, it's Neptune in Pisces, it literally is water, but the pool of consciousness as well, the pool of our energy and our vibration. And so what we're having to do here collectively with these karmic points, these destined points, is we're at this crossroads, essentially. Neptune's saying to us, you know, we're at this point between where we're coming from, the past, and where we're going to. And what we need to understand is that we're part of the collective, right? That's Neptune. Now, there's really great aspects that come along with that, and there's really crappy aspects that come along with that, right? And so what we're being forced to do, or pushed or encouraged to do with that, is to just establish for ourselves what that meaning is, because Neptune gives meaning to things. It's kind of like a stone is, to one person, a weight that's going to stop something blowing away. To another person, it's a weapon that they could use to throw at someone. To someone else, it's a tool that they could use to open a nut or something, you know. That's just a thing, which is neutral. Everything in life is completely neutral. And then three different people attaching three different meanings to that completely neutral thing is what Neptune does. All right, it's our imagination, and it comes from our level of consciousness. The meaning that we'll attach to that comes from where we're at, essentially, in terms of our journey as a soul through many, many lifetimes and how we've evolved. And so we are awash with all of these other different meanings. And some of them are things that we've collectively agreed upon, you know, the consensus. And some of them are things that we really, really haven't. Some of them are healthy and supportive and nourishing to our spiritual growth. Some of them really aren't. So if you imagine a pool of water and all of humanity is around the edge of that pool of water, we're all putting things into the pool and drawing things out of the pool at the same time. We have no choice. We are interconnected to everybody else on this planet, and there's a matrix of consciousness that connects us all. And this is what Neptune's all about. So as you can understand, drinking from that pool can expose us to toxins. You know, if lots of other people are pouring, you know, nasty shit in that water and we've got to drink from it, then we're going to be poisoned. And in fact, Neptune rules toxins and poisons and things getting into the fluids of the body. So it also rules in a hard aspect like this. It can make a victim of us, Neptune, because Neptune is egoless and trusting, and it's got a really kind, innocent heart. And unfortunately, the world that we live in doesn't always. I'm speaking as a Pisces, I know this stuff. So there's a gullibility, there's a naivety, there's a purity and an innocence to Neptune, particularly in Pisces, where it just sees the good. And unfortunately, it can really come a cropper from doing that and having the rose-tinted glasses or the beer goggles on in terms of how it views humanity. So what can happen is that we can be taken advantage of. We can be victimized, you know, by our naivety. We can be polluted. We can be poisoned, you know, toxified, however, you know, you want to sort of interpret that. We can be lied to, we can be misled, and we can be incredibly confused and disillusioned, because it's like, it's our faith, our trust in God that we're all, that fundamentally everyone's a good person, and, you know, life is good and God will look after us. It's our faith, it's our belief. And when there's hard aspects to Neptune, we can really feel like God's forsaken us, you know, whatever your beliefs are around God or source energy. We can feel God forsaken. And I'm telling you, 2020 kind of feels a little bit like there wasn't much God involved. And we can really feel that disillusionment, of that kind of like, you know, we've had all this hope and all this potential that we can be as human beings. And, you know, when we have this square aspect, it's going to be like, oh shit, really? Are we just doing that? It can be a real bubble burst moment, essentially. But it's a push to find our meaning, all right, outside of the polluting influence of the collective, if that makes sense. So it's a push for mastery in terms of, okay, what's my way forward? How do I use the past to move me into the future? What have I learned about being a member of the collective and being sort of a victim of the collective consciousness as well? So this is really important stuff. So that any aspects that come up throughout the year with Neptune involved are going to be those kind of flash points. And of course, with Neptune being a mutable sign, that means that with the eclipses taking place in mutable signs, Gemini and Sag, and then Virgo season as well, as planets move into Virgo, these are going to be the times when Neptune gets activated. So Pisces season, Gemini season, Virgo season, Sag season. They're going to be the flashpoints there. So that June the 10th eclipse then being in square to Neptune, particularly with having Mercury retrograde alongside, the word for this is confusion. I mean, this really is. This really is confusion, because Mercury retrograde on its own is confusion, but a hard aspect between Mercury and Neptune is confusion in itself. You know, Neptune blurs things, it makes things foggy, and, you know, like all the paints like merging into each other. There's no clarity and precision with Neptune at all. And that's specifically what Mercury wants, you know. Mercury rules Virgo, the opposite of Pisces. It's like chaos and control. So yeah, so having that double whammy of Mercury in a hard aspect to Neptune as Mercury is retrograde, confusion. It's going to be confusing. So of course that we have to factor that into the whole Jupiter and Pisces bubble as well. Then November the 19th is the next eclipse. That's a partial lunar eclipse, again, a full moon. That's at 27 degrees of Taurus. So again, it's going to be activating the fixed signs. And at that time, we're actually going to have Mars in, where have you gone, Mars? Is he up there? Yeah. So Mars is going to be in Scorpio by then. On home ground, you know, Mars is the traditional ruler of Scorpio, so quite powerfully placed. And he's going to, if I can find an opposition, Mars is going to oppose Uranus. So that's going to be another flashpoint. of Uranus energy, and potentially therefore a repeat of, you know, with this conjunction of Mars Uranus that we're moving into in January. If that's kind of like the new moon of Mars and Uranus energy, then when Mars is then in Scorpio, that's kind of like the full moon of Mars and Uranus, essentially. So that's November the 19th. And the eclipse will actually square Jupiter again. So it's pulling in the Jupiter theme once more. And then the very last eclipse of 2021 is a total solar eclipse. Again, that's a new moon. This one is at 12 degrees of Sagittarius. And that is going to be conjunct Mercury. And we're also going to have the backdrop of Mars in square to Jupiter as well. So we're going to have a Mars-Jupiter square there. So again, that could be a very kind of like, I'm right, you're wrong, you have to believe what I believe, that kind of vibe to it as well. But obviously I'll be here to talk to you and go into it more specifically. I just wanted to outline these key dates just to give you a flavor, just to give you an overview. It's going to be very different. I mean, Uranus is all about difference. I'm just wondering if I've covered everything. Oh, there's just one more thing to cover actually. But yeah, it's going to be very different from 2020. It's going to be a completely different vibe. And we definitely can look forward to Jupiter and Pisces as well. But, you know, if you've been following me for a little while, you'll know the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, them coming together. I picked a hexagram from the I Ching to represent that. And that particular hexagram is called Little Progress. So it's thunder, which is Jupiter, and mountains, which is Saturn. And essentially Jupiter is, you know, it does rule, Jupiter rules thunder, is the god of thunder. And that sound that is made with thunder needs to travel many miles, which is what Jupiter's all about, right? He wants to have a far reach. And essentially what it's saying is that, yes, we'll hear the thunder of Jupiter, but the mountains are kind of going to get in the way and it's going to bounce off the mountains a bit. So it's not going to go quite as far. So essentially what it's saying is, yes, we can make some progress, but we need to just expect that it's going to be slower progress than we might have liked. And there might be a little bit more work and a bit more limitation involved in that. But there will still be opportunities and there will still be progress, essentially. That's why I picked that Cheng for you. And that really does kind of just remind us, just, you know, have expectations, but keep those expectations in check. Be prepared for all of the disruption and rebellion that we're going to experience. And if you get caught up in that, remember to be. And the one last thing that I forgot to talk about, which is in February the 11th. So this is really as we're coming up to the first exact square between Saturn and Uranus. This is really super cool. This is really rare. I'm not sure how often this happens, but I'm pretty sure it hasn't happened since like the 60s. We've got Venus. Where's my Venus? Sorry, I'm not doing very well here. Oh, there she is. Okay, so we've got Mercury, who's actually going to be retrograde because we're going into a Mercury retrograde quite soon. So we've got a Mercury retrograde with Venus and Saturn and Jupiter and the Sun and the Moon all in Aquarius at the same time. So this is basically every visible planet. So we have 7 visible planets, the traditional planets that are at the limits of what we can see with the human eye. Everything except Mars, essentially. Sun, Moon, Jupiter, Venus, Mercury, and Saturn, all in the same sign. That's a super stellium. You know, a stellium is when we've got like 4 or more. That is I mean, you know, that is so Aquarian. It's like we are going to be filled with Aquarian vibration at that time. And I think because we're building into the very first square between Saturn and Uranus at that time as well, you know, we're really, really going to feel more of the Uranus vibe potentially of, yeah, change, progress. How are we going to make things better? How are we going to make things more equal? And a real will for making a new start, you know, making some new progress. It's a new moon. The Aquarius new moon is like a new beginning. So let's try and absolutely focus our intention on pulling the best out of the Saturn and Uranus square and infusing that into that new moon as we move forward. So that's all I've got for you. Happy New Year. I hope it was helpful. Please give me some feedback. Let me know what you like about what I do and what you don't like. Give me some ideas if there's anything else you'd like me to cover. I'm, you know, I'm very mutable. I'm Pisces, so I'm happy to adapt if it helps with the learning process, because that's really what I'm interested in. If you drop me a message if you'd like the Zoom session that I did on the natural wheel of the year and how it relates to astrology, because that can be super helpful in understanding. Remember that really it's not the new year, it's kind of an arbitrary date. And yeah, I think that's about all. Oh, like my YouTube channel, that really helps support me. Make sure you're following me on Facebook as well, because I do a lot of other stuff on there that I don't do elsewhere. And it kind of all weaves together. You know, the daily updates that I put on Instagram and on Facebook support what I do with the YouTube videos as well. So it kind of, it helps just to kind of flesh things out. Hope this has been helpful. I will stop now. Lots of love to you all. Have an amazing celebration of it being the start of winter. Lots of love. Bye.